When I moved into my apartment last year, the building manager told me one rule before handing me the keys: never take the elevator alone after 11 p.m. He didn't explain why. I laughed it off, the way you laugh off any strange rule from a stranger. 3 months later, I understood exactly why he said it, and I wish I'd asked more questions before I found out the hard way. I moved to the city for a new job, found a decent one-bedroom in an older building downtown, rent surprisingly reasonable for the location. The building manager, a quiet older man named Mr. Ferris, gave me the keys personally and mentioned, almost in passing, that I should avoid taking the elevator alone after 11 p.m. He said it the way you'd mention a temperamental radiator or a door that sticks, a minor inconvenience, nothing more. I asked why. He said the elevator was old and sometimes acted up late at night, and it was easier to just take the stairs. It sounded reasonable enough. I didn't think about it again for weeks. The first time. I worked late most nights that first month, usually getting home well past 11. Out of laziness more than anything, I ignored the manager's advice and took the elevator anyway, dozens of times, without incident. Then, about 6 weeks in, I got in around 11:40 p.m. after a long shift, pressed 4 for my floor, and the doors closed normally. But instead of moving, the elevator just sat there, lights flickering slightly, numbers not changing. I pressed the button again. Nothing. After almost a full minute of sitting still, the elevator lurched and began moving, but the number display started counting down instead of up. 3, 2, 1, then, instead of stopping at the lobby or opening at all, it kept going. 0, -1. I didn't know the building had a basement level. I'd never seen a button for it on the panel, and when I looked, there still wasn't one. The elevator was simply moving somewhere the buttons didn't account for, the number display ticking down on its own. The doors opened at what the display now read as B2. What I saw. I want to be clear that I didn't step out. I want that on record, because everything that happened after started because I looked, not because I left the elevator. The space beyond the doors wasn't a basement in any normal sense. It was dim, lit by a single bulb somewhere far in the distance, and the floor looked like it stretched much farther back than the building's actual footprint should have allowed. There was no smell of concrete or mechanical rooms, nothing like a normal basement, just still, cold air, and silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Standing about 20 feet back from the doors, facing away from me, was a person. Just standing there, motionless, in what looked like normal clothes, arms at their sides, in a spot that made no sense for anyone to simply be standing in at midnight in a windowless space with no visible exits. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. After what felt like 10 full seconds but was probably only 2 or 3, the person began, very slowly, to turn around. I hit the door close button so hard I felt something in my hand pop, and the doors slid shut just as the figure had turned maybe halfway toward me. I don't know what I would have seen if it had finished turning. I've never wanted to know less. The elevator returned to the lobby normally after that, numbers counting up in order like nothing had happened. Trying to explain it away. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I found Mr. Ferris in the lobby and asked him directly what was on the basement level. He looked at me for a long moment before saying, quietly, that the building didn't have a basement level, and that the elevator only served floors 1 through 6. I told him what happened. I described the countdown, the B2 display, the figure standing in the dark. He didn't seem surprised, exactly, more like a man hearing a story he'd heard several times before from other tenants, in other years. He simply repeated his original advice: don't take the elevator alone after 11 p.m. When I asked what would happen if the doors had opened all the way and I'd stepped out, he said something I still think about constantly. He said nobody who stepped out had ever come back to ask him that question themselves. I moved my schedule around after that, made sure I was always home before 11, always used the stairs on the rare nights I was late. For nearly 4 months, nothing else happened, and I started to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing, exhaustion and stress playing tricks on an overtired mind. Then my friend Alicia came to visit. Alicia stayed over for a weekend, sleeping on my couch. On her second night, she went down to grab something from her car around 11:20 p.m., taking the elevator without knowing anything about the rule, because I'd never actually told her. Some part of me was embarrassed to say it out loud to someone else, worried she'd think I was losing it. She was gone almost 20 minutes, far longer than the trip to her car should have taken. When she came back up, she was pale, quiet, and told me the elevator had taken her down to a floor she'd never seen before, one that wasn't in the lobby directory, and that she'd stood frozen the entire ride, too scared to press any buttons, until it eventually reached the lobby again on its own. She said she saw a display reading B2 as well, though she'd never heard me mention that detail, and that while the doors were open, she heard, very clearly, someone say her name from somewhere deep in that dark space, calm, familiar, using the exact nickname only her family used for her. She left the next morning, cutting her visit short, and hasn't come back to stay overnight since, though we still talk regularly. She's never fully explained why she won't visit again, and I've never pushed her to. Now, I still live in that building. I still use the stairs after 11 p.m. without exception, even when I'm exhausted, even when it's 6 flights up after a double shift. I've asked around casually, and I've found at least 3 other tenants who've mentioned, in vague, uncomfortable terms, a version of the same story, a countdown, a basement that shouldn't exist, a figure standing in the dark, sometimes turning around, sometimes not. Nobody who mentions the figure turning all the way around still lives in the building. I've noticed that pattern, and I've decided not to think about it too hard. Mr. Ferris retired last spring. Before he left, he told the new manager the same rule he told me on my first day, word for word, and I watched the new manager laugh it off exactly the way I once did. I didn't say anything. Some things you have to learn yourself, the same way I did, and some warnings only make sense after it's already too late to need them. If you ever move somewhere and someone tells you not to take the elevator alone after a certain hour, don't ask why. Just don't take it. The answer isn't worth knowing, and neither is the floor.